Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Earlier today, I tried to do a Google Hangout, but after I recorded the Hangout, I noticed that there were audio problems, so I had to delete it. So I'm going to do this video now, summarizing some of the points that I made in the Hangout. And in that Hangout, I was addressing comments that people left in my video entitled Regime Change, My Response to Boyce Watkins. So I'm going to go through a few of the comments and respond to them. One of the main points that people made was this. They said elections don't matter. Basically, that was a point that people made. And my response to that is this. If elections don't matter, why would the white man prevent African Americans from voting for years, for decades? Why would they persecute those who tried to obtain the right to vote? Why would they assassinate leaders who were fighting for voting rights? Why would they impose laws like poll taxes and literacy tests? Why would they send dogs on protesters who were simply demanding the right to vote if our vote didn't matter? Why would they beat civil rights workers and shoot civil rights workers who were simply fighting for the right to vote if our vote didn't matter? Why do they continue to try to suppress the black vote today if our vote didn't matter, if our vote does not matter? Why are they trying to strike down and get rid of key provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which they were successful in doing? They struck down Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. Why would they even take the step to do that if it didn't even matter? It wouldn't make any sense for them to do this if it didn't make a difference, if our right to vote did not matter. Why would many jurisdictions, after Section 4 was struck down, why would the jurisdictions that were covered by Section 4, why would they rush to enact laws designed to suppress the black vote if our votes didn't matter? You have examples like North Carolina, a state that imposed one of the most restrictive voting laws in the country. They imposed strict voter ID requirements. They got rid of same-day voter registration. They cut back on early voting. They eliminated out-of-precinct voting, and they eliminated pre-registration. And before they enacted this restrictive law, they knew that it would have a disparate impact on black communities. They knew that it would disproportionately and adversely affect black people, but they went ahead with it anyway. And the Fourth Circuit found that that law was discriminatory, and they found that the legislature targeted black people with almost surgical precision. Why would a legislator go through all that trouble to suppress our vote if our vote didn't matter? Why would they enact laws like they enacted in Texas, imposing a discriminatory voter ID law that was struck down for that reason? Why would they do that? Why do you have groups sending misinformation to black communities if our votes don't matter? Telling people the wrong dates to vote, threatening people with jail time for voting, spreading all kinds of lies about the law. Why would they do all of that if our votes didn't matter? Our votes matter, and it's time for us to realize that. Now, I want to address a couple of other points that were made in the comment section. One point is this. People said, well, how can you criticize those people who don't vote when you supported a third-party candidate, and by doing so, you helped elect a Donald Trump? Well, this is my response. First of all, I live in Maryland. Maryland is a solidly blue state, meaning that Maryland votes overwhelmingly for Democratic presidential candidates. Over many elections, they have always voted for the Democratic presidential candidate. This time around, they voted like 70%, over 70% for Hillary Clinton. So by voting for a third-party candidate in such an environment, there was no risk of Trump winning here in Maryland, simply because I voted for a third-party candidate. Also, when you look at the entire country, Jill Stein only received like 1% of the popular vote in this country. She did not have any kind of impact on this election. She did not cause Hillary Clinton to lose this election. As I said in another video, Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party are responsible for her losing, in part. And there are other factors, but I think that they are responsible. The Democratic Party and the Democratic National Committee are responsible because they selected a weak candidate. They nominated a weak candidate. The DNC basically put their hand on the scale. They did everything in their power to make sure that Hillary won the primary. Here's a woman with all kinds of baggage, with all kinds of scandals surrounding her. A woman with trust issues, a woman that's not viewed as credible, someone that's viewed as insincere, phony, and fake. They knew all of this going in, but yet they put her forth as the nominee. And all of a sudden, they're surprised with the result. They had a chance to nominate a strong candidate in Bernie Sanders, someone who was polling better than Hillary in matchups with Donald Trump, according to several articles, and I'll post some of them in the description box so that you can check those out. So the Democratic Party, the DNC, they're responsible for this result, and even the Hillary Clinton campaign. I think that at a certain point they took this election for granted, and they assumed that they had it on lock because all the polls were leaning their way, and they didn't fight as hard as they should have to secure key constituencies like African American voters and women. They took women for granted. They took the Latino community for granted. They just assumed that all these groups would be behind Hillary, and that was a tragic mistake. So don't blame this on people who supported third-party candidates. Don't blame this on black people. Black women supported Hillary Clinton overwhelmingly. But what about those white women that should have been behind her theoretically? Since she is a white woman after all, since she is someone with a history of fighting for women's rights, and since her opponent is a man who was accused of sexual assault, a man who actually admitted and bragged about sexually assaulting women on video, a man who makes all kinds of derogatory statements about women, that man is a disgrace, and women who decided to vote for that man should be ashamed of themselves. Those women are responsible for this man getting elected. These women have put their race, their racism above their own issues as women. And the same is true for a lot of those rural voters who voted for Donald Trump, a lot of those working class voters that voted for this man, despite the fact that this man has no track record at all of supporting, of protecting, of defending workers' rights or workers or poor people. But yet this is the man that many of these poor whites rally around because they have bought into the lie of white supremacy, and they see him as some kind of savior type figure to make America great again. So don't blame this on black people. Don't blame this on those of us who voted third party, take a look in the mirror. And we have to remember, this is America, after all, a country with a long legacy of racism, a country that was founded on racism, a country that's all about racism. And Donald Trump just tapped into that natural racist sentiment in society. Now, another person said this in the comment section. They said, the system is not ours to participate in. That's what they said. As long as you live in America, this system is your system. You are part of this system, whether you want to be or not. As long as you live in this country, you are governed by the laws of this country. You are affected by the laws passed by the legislatures on the state, local, and federal levels. You are affected by the actions of the president. When the president appoints people to the Supreme Court, you are directly affected because the Supreme Court defines and interprets the laws that shape our constitutional rights, our civil rights, and our basic civil liberties and human rights. So you are affected by the system, whether or not you like the system, whether or not you oppose the system, whether or not you are a nationalist, a conservative, a Republican, or a Democrat. You are affected by the system. You pay taxes. You pay taxes in this country, so you are affected by the system. You are part of the system, whether you want to be or not. And since you are a part of the system, why not try to change the system by electing candidates that support your agenda? So that's not an excuse. That's not a justification for not voting, because you are a part of the system. Also, I'm going to address a couple of other points. Someone said, will politicians get into office and they don't do anything for us? And they said, well, we don't get anything in exchange for our vote. There are politicians that do that. And the only reason why that happens is because we don't hold these politicians accountable. We don't present a strong, clear, concrete agenda to these politicians, and we don't demand that they adhere to that agenda. See, what we should do is, well before an election, we should go to prospective candidates and tell them what our agenda is and get their commitment to that agenda well before an election even starts. And once we have a commitment, we should support those candidates, not only with our vote, but with our dollars and with our resources. And when those candidates don't comply or live up to their pledges and their commitments, then we get rid of them and replace them with those that do. This is what all special interest groups do. Whether you're talking about women's rights groups or gay rights groups or gun control groups or the NRA or these Zionist groups that are pushing a pro-Israel agenda, they hold politicians accountable like that. And that's the way we should be. And we shouldn't just hold politicians accountable. We need to hold these so-called leaders accountable in our community. People like a Boyce Watkins. And we need to hold them accountable the same way that, for instance, people hold coaches accountable of teams. If a coach does a lousy job and his team is losing game after game, the owner of the team will get rid of that coach. And that's what we need to do when it comes to politics. That's what we need to do when it comes to these so-called black leaders. Too often we are pacified with beautiful speeches. We're entertained by that. But we need more than entertainment when it comes to leaders. We need more than charisma when it comes to leaders. We need leaders that produce results. And a person like Boyce Watkins, who basically slept on this election, basically implied that black people shouldn't vote, that's not leadership. That's somebody that was sleeping on the job. And I'm not going to go back over the points that I made in the last couple of videos, but you know where I'm going. Also, somebody asked me about Malcolm X. They said, well, are you mad at Malcolm X? And I assume that they asked this question because they believe that Malcolm X didn't support voting. That's why they would ask that question. But if you look at Malcolm X's history, after he left the nation, he gave a powerful speech called The Ballot or the Bullet. And in that speech, he talked about how the black vote can be decisive in these presidential elections. Go listen to that speech. I will post a link to the speech in the description box so that you can watch it for yourself. But in that speech, it's clear and obvious that Malcolm X realized the importance of the vote, and so should we. I'm going to go through a couple more questions or points that were raised. Now, somebody said this. They said, people are being slaughtered, and you want us to believe that our vote counts. People are being slaughtered, and you want us to believe that our vote counts. And I understand that point. I understand the person's frustration. Here you have right now a black president, but you see all these incidents of police brutality, and it seems like there's nothing that the president is doing to stop that problem. The fact of the matter is, police brutality has been with us since the beginning of the police departments, since the creation of the police. We have been brutalized by the police. We have been harassed by the police. We have been oppressed by the police. That is nothing new. The only thing that's new now is that we have technology. Each and every one of us, for the most part, has a cell phone. We're able to capture video and photographs in an instant. So a lot of these incidents of police brutality are being captured on video. And, you know, that's an important issue. But when people talk about our vote and they connect it to this issue of police brutality, they need to understand that a lot of these policing issues can be addressed on a local level. They can be addressed by the prosecutors that we have the choice of electing. We can elect prosecutors who view police brutality as a top priority, ending police brutality as a top priority. Prosecutors like Marilyn Mosby here in Maryland, in Baltimore. A prosecutor who had the courage to go against the grain and bring charges against those officers who were responsible for the death of Freddie Gray. That's the kind of prosecutor we can elect. Instead of spineless prosecutors who have no integrity, who kowtow to the police, we can elect strong prosecutors. And that way, we can affect change through our vote. We can elect mayors who realize the importance of ending police brutality and racial profiling. And those mayors, in turn, can appoint chiefs of police that understand that problem and who are willing and able to address it. So on the local level, we can make a difference. And on the federal level, by electing a president like Obama, we can make some kind of difference, because under Obama, under his Justice Department, they investigated many incidents of police brutality. Although I haven't been satisfied with everything the Justice Department has done, I will say this: I'm satisfied with the fact that they reached settlement agreements in Baltimore City and Ferguson to end discriminatory policing practices. That's what you can do. And that's how your vote can impact this issue of police brutality. Now, I hear some people talk about, this issue of the Electoral College, and they say, well, candidates are not elected, they're selected. But the fact of the matter is, even though we indirectly elect the president through electors are pledged to vote for certain candidates. And these electors vote in a way that's consistent with the popular vote within the state that they represent. Rarely do electors vote contrary to their pledge. Rarely do they vote contrary to the will of the popular vote within that particular state. Rarely is that the case. And in the very few rare incidents where that has occurred, it didn't change the election results. So we need to quit telling people these fairy tales and these ridiculous, unsubstantiated conspiracy theories, when the fact of the matter is we have the ability to decide who will be the president. Now I'm just going to address a couple of other points. One point that somebody made is this in the comment section. They said, well, if large numbers of people sit out the election, that will cause a panic, that will disrupt the system, and that will somehow bring about some kind of change. That's part of what they were suggesting with that comment. The fact of the matter is, when people sit out the election in large numbers, all that does is help maintain the status quo. It doesn't change anything, and nobody's in a panic. The process just continues as usual. Large percentages of people do not vote in many of these elections, especially in elections where it's not the presidential election. Here in Baltimore, during the election, not this year's election, but prior elections, I think the election right before this one 2 years ago, they talked about how abysmal, how low the voting rate was, the voter participation rate was here in the city. But yet the process continued as usual. Politicians didn't stop and take notice and all of a sudden be concerned about those who didn't vote. When you don't vote, you don't even count. When a group of people don't participate in the process, don't vote regularly, politicians don't even bother to waste their time addressing that group, because that group has already rendered themselves to be a non-factor. They have rendered themselves to be irrelevant. They have surrendered. And, so those are my responses to a lot of those questions that people raised. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing anything before I go. One person asked, what did the candidates do to motivate us? That was one question that they asked. And that's a valid question. Politicians should be doing everything that they can to try to get votes, but we have to be our own source of motivation. We have to realize what is at stake in these elections and the importance of voting. And we need to do our own homework and evaluate these candidates and decide which candidate best serves our interests. So those are my thoughts. I just thought that it was important to follow up with a video responding to a lot of the comments that I received in my last video. And I'm sorry that hangout didn't come through well because of the audio problems. I thought that it was a great hangout. I enjoy interacting with you all live. And just to remind you all, every Monday around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do have my Google Hangouts, and I plan to have one this coming Monday. So I hope that you all can join that hangout, and by then my audio issues should be addressed. So tell me what you think about this whole issue of voting. Tell me what you think about all of these so-called black leaders like Boyce, Watkins, Umar Johnson, and Tariq Nasheed and their campaign, their Don't Vote campaign. I know that that's what Tariq Nasheed calls that campaign, but those others, Boyce Watkins and Dr. Umar Johnson, they both essentially have espoused similar ideas. So tell me what you think about all of this. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.